Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Day. This is the last Friday in the month of April, and the question bugging me, Mark, is where is the resident electoral commissioner of Adamawa State? Or, I don't know, maybe former resident electoral commissioner?
Suspended, we understand.
But where is he?
Big question. I mean, I'm also wondering, as you are, because we do know that INEC has written to the Inspector General to ask, you know, that he be investigated and prosecuted. We had the IGP, it wasn't the IGP, the spokesperson to the police saying that they were waiting for that particular letter.
And we heard Okoye say they haven't heard from him.
They haven't heard from him. So, and how come they haven't, if he's nowhere to be found, how come they haven't declared him wanted just yet? You know, big question, but we hope that this is not one matter they think will just disappear like that. It's not just going to go poof. This is one matter we intend to stay on every day, asking the question, where is the REC of Adamawa? You know, is INEC not going to proceed with this? Is it INEC now or the police? Whichever one of them.
All of them.
You know, proceed with this prosecution if indeed there was an infraction. We want to know the outcome of the investigation. But welcome to the program. I think my manners...
No, it was just
I've
me.
left me, or maybe it's the sense of urgency, you know, that Nyotas used to ask his question. Good morning and welcome. Amaokwe Yusuf.
Well, speaking of hope, the one on this side is that the Nigerian students who are on their way will arrive safely. Good morning and welcome. I am Bukola Koka.
And I'm Ayo Makinde. Well, just to let you know that today is the 28th of April. And yes, Nyota, that countdown you raised is quite significant. Where is the REC? As the question abounds for so many other issues unresolved. But one that is already on the table, which is being resolved, is the one that Bukola just mentioned, which is the question around Sudan, especially the Nigerian students that are on their way home from Sudan, and one is wondering exactly what the issues are that are being raised by these students. We hope to have a conversation around that later on this morning, but the concerns are in no mean way as significant as it can be, because we're hearing all kinds of things from all kinds of sides. We have heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs talk about the fact that they're already on their way and money has been assigned. That was confirmed yesterday when we spoke with that the young man who is currently in Sudan, validating that he actually saw the receipt that the payment had been made. So to be hearing that some people are saying that they haven't been fully paid, and having students stranded in the desert or in the wilderness or wherever it is for reason of money not being fully paid, it definitely is something concerning. Well, we also know that the chairman of NITCOM has said we shouldn't believe everything that is in the social media space. Yes, ma'am, we hear you. However, unless we have alternative information, we say that nature abhors vacuum. But unless there is some more significant, valid information, we seem to be boxed into a corner of listening to what may or may not be true.
And she's quite right, you know, about thinking twice about certain information put on social media. But she herself, you know, tweeted above that information saying that she had spoken with the DG of NEMA and all issues have been resolved. But why are we still to hear that very important information that Nigerian students have indeed arrived Aswan border in Egypt and are just awaiting the aircraft from Air Peace and perhaps many other airlines that will be participating in the process to airlift them and bring them home? And, you know, not to forget also that 2 days ago, during that all-important press conference, the Minister of State also said that there are some students that had arrived Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, and that indeed Nigeria enjoys, you know, very good diplomatic relations with these neighboring countries, and, you know, they were going to arrive soon. But the chairman of Air Peace is saying that he's awaiting diplomatic permit, landing permit, you know, to arrive, to take off to Egypt. So all of these issues are very, very worrying. If we indeed enjoy diplomatic relations, why is this delay in, the landing permit for the airlines that will be participating in this process to take off? And we're talking about Sudan, where although the ceasefire has been extended, but fighting is continuing. We spoke to another Nigerian from that country yesterday who said that they're hearing gunshots, and it appears that, the ceasefire has been broken. Don't forget that there's a humanitarian situation. They're unable to get credit card for electricity. There are no banking services.
Essentially,
there are no hospitals.
Life as they knew it has changed.
Has changed. We could go on and on. There's a dire humanitarian situation. A lot of them have no money. We heard them in that very scary, massive expanse of wilderness in the middle of nowhere yesterday. It's unsettling. We need information about where our Nigerian students are at this point in time. Malpe and Nyota.
Some stories you just ask yourself, why is it that we just can't, follow through? Why is it that we just can't, start with good news and end with good news? Or we start in a place that is not so positive, and then we end in a place that is so good. I'm still hoping that there will be room for redemption in this particular instance, because initially there was a bit of fear when the Nigerian government said that, look, this evacuation will have to be done by road because the airspace was no longer safe and that the airports were no longer useful. And we saw the visuals of the airport, parts of it going up in flames and even airplanes being set on fire. So people could understand that. And even a number of other countries that had tried international evacuations had also, they faced pretty complicated situations. But we also understood that there was going to be a logistical nightmare trying to, move 5,500 people by road through the coaches that were currently staying to Egypt. But this was an operation that we were assured that NEMA was prepared for, even in spite of all of it. But the kind of stories that we're hearing right now is very heartbreaking, that you hear that, the bus drivers were not paid, or that, there were, how many buses? Is it 15 buses? Only 35 took off, another how many were left behind with students waiting to be taken, or that buses stopped in the middle of the desert because of full payment, or that, Nigerian students had to surrender their passports to the drivers for some assurance of full payment. Meanwhile, we understand that monies have already been approved for this particular operation, and there is dead silence on the part of the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs, because there's a whole minister for that entire ministry. So we need to ask questions, because I know that she's also in charge of NEMA. NEMA is an agency. They also, enjoy some autonomy. I'm hoping that we'll be able to get clarification. But in the end, while we're waiting for all of this clarification, what we really want is for Nigerian students to be safely evacuated from Khartoum and other places where, the conflict has met up with them, and brought, to Egypt, where we understand that they will be safely airlifted. This sort of stories, really sometimes makes people lose faith. Just when we say, oh, it looks like they're about to do something grand, and then all of a sudden, you hear this kinds of stories, people will just be like, what is going on? I'm hoping that apart from the clarification, as Madam Abike has said, that we will be, that all that needs to be sorted out will be sorted out, and that we'll be seeing students safely in Egypt. Nyota.
Mark, hearing these kind of things brings me nostalgia. I suddenly begin to miss the days when other people would rather come to Nigeria to go to school than see Nigerians go outside to school, because our schools were what they're supposed to be. Yeah. The curriculums were good and right. The environment for the students were good and right. Those were the days when Nigerian students in the universities were sure that they were getting the right kind of lectures, they were getting the right kind of environment to learn and grow. And when they went outside just to get an additional level of education and expand their horizon. So I miss those days. Yes, I wasn't there, but you just hear this.
Are you for real?
No, come on,
I mean,
Margaret.
that's significantly older than me as you are.
Even
you
at that,
weren't
Margaret,
there.
I mean, I wasn't there, but
Wow.
you hear from our fathers the things they had to go through, the way they learned, the environment they had, and you miss those days. Those kind of days, if we had those kind of days now, we won't be having this kind of situation. So why don't we look at how we can rework our environment, rework our schools, so that our children, our brothers and sisters will not be thinking to go outside. Our brothers and sisters will not be thinking to send their children outside, out of Nigeria to go to school, out of necessity, not out of a desire to expand horizons. Having said that, the agencies that are meant to do these things also, the funding for this, I mean, there are allegations out there about the last time Nigerians were evacuated from Ukraine, the funds that were released for that have not been all expended. Okay, if they've not all been expended, what's going on? Okay, can we just take a bit of that and add to this so that we get this sorted out once and for all? $1.2 million already expended, and, well, as Bukola mentioned, we shouldn't believe everything we see on social media, but even at that, they say for every time you see smoke, there is fire somewhere. There's a smoldering fire somewhere. So at the end of the day, when you hear these rumors, what is the truth? When the government, when the authorities are not speaking to the people, what you give room for is for speculation and rumors, and then you begin to run around to quench the fires that might be starting because you're not communicating. We do hope that we'll be able to hear from NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency. The DG was supposed to join us. He delegated the director to join us. Maybe for technical reasons that was unable to, but we're hoping that his SA, special assistant or special advisor, will join us from Cairo today so that we can get clarification on what is going on. Is it true that Nigerian students were left in the wilderness and the buses were all parked there and the students were, or Nigerians were just walking about? Is that true? Did it really happen? What's going on at the moment? Have they arrived? It takes about 15 to 28 hours or thereabout to certain parts of Egypt from Sudan. So have they arrived at the destination? All of these questions need to be clarified, because whether they are related to you or not, you might say, well, my family is not there. They are Nigerians. Yeah. You're a Nigerian. We should be concerned that our people, our fellow citizens are out there and things are not too clear. So we're actually waiting to, hopefully, we'll hear from this, from NEMA and the agencies that I mentioned. You mentioned the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs. Indeed. They are the direct overseeing ministry for the National Emergency Management Agency. It used to be directly underneath the presidency, but we understand that since that ministry was created, it was moved there. Humanitarian affairs, and these are human beings. Can we get a word, a clarification, what's happening? Ayo.
Well, I guess it's only, the rest of it will all depend on time for us, because at the end of the day, just as you said, we're just hoping that we'll be able to get those clarity today, because without those information coming in as expected, the issues will not just go away. Let's segue into the papers right now to look at some of the issues. By the way, we just have news now that we're hoping to have a representative of the DG NEMA, as you said, Nilta, who will be joining us shortly. The paper this morning, let's begin with a look at them right after now. This Nigeria is our first pick this morning, and seems to have shared notes with us this morning, Bukola. Drivers dump Nigerians leaving Sudan in desert, demand full payment. True or not true? I guess we'll have to wait for some clarity. Look at the rider. 588 students in first batch, over 1,500 still waiting for buses. Find that story on pages 5 and 11 of the paper this morning. But right under the picture you see on the front page, as well as above the nameplate, are two issues sharing similar interests. National Economic Council, that's below the picture, halts removal of fuel subsidy. Committee Incoming Tinubu administration to determine extension beyond June, says Ahmed Finance Minister. Stories on page 4. And look at this one. Fuel shortages slowed Nigeria's economy in Q1 2023 reports. That's according to a report. Stories on page 17.
And that's no surprise, considering that the pump price of petrol has a ricochet effect on every aspect of the economy, particularly when it is increased. But that story on fuel subsidy is also followed up on the front page of the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian newspaper this morning, right beside the one of the pictures on the front page. This is how it's captioned. After $800 million palliative, FG suspends subsidy, cites wrong timing. So palliative, that's what we heard it called, at the time when the Minister of Finance was talking about how to share and, plans with the transition team of the incoming administration.
My challenge, Bukola, is that word palliative doesn't ring well with Nigerians since 2020. You remember, you understand what I'm talking about.
True, because palliative doesn't always turn out to be palliative.
Not just that, but that the memory of palliatives, hoarded palliatives, is what comes to the minds of so many people when you hear palliative. These issues are very, very serious, and I'm hoping that government is sensitive to that, because just as I think you mentioned it earlier, or was it Malcolm that mentioned it, that trust deficit is reducing, even increasing. We're probably on minus trust deficit now, and government at any and every level needs to do something seriously to build that confidence. So that otherwise, every word that comes out of government, whoever, even if it's a cleaner in a government office, will not be believed.
True, and you rightly recalled palliative from COVID times that were hoarded. But even palliatives from the past, when attempts at suspending fuel subsidy were made, how far-reaching were those palliatives? How many households benefited from those palliatives? How many young Nigerians had their lives transformed as a result of those palliatives?
I guess
we'll go on and on about those questions. But this is another look at the Guardian newspaper this morning, and there's another story that is just as worrying. Nigeria's drug crisis hits 500 billion naira worth of seizures yearly. It's a big story, and you'll find details on pages 4 and 5. Now, the NDLEA made we could call it a harvest of arrests, in the last 1 year or so. But why does this not deter those who also, those who embark on transporting illicit drugs, those who abuse it, those who sell it?
The concern will not go away.
Yeah.
Nyota.
Let's leave it there for the Guardian newspaper.
And the Vanguard is what I have here. The big picture you'll see there before the headlines. Look at that picture. Colorful colors there. And I mean, just look at that picture. Beautiful. Yesterday there was a presentation of colors, or trooping of colors as it's called, and it was just awesome. It's called the Army Colors Parade. Watching that presentation, the retiring of certain colors and the return of certain colors, oh my goodness, it was just amazing.
Filling you with goosebumps,
the fluidity, come on. Anyway, let's not go there. But it was beautiful.
Yeah.
And so President Buhari participates at the Nigerian Army Trooping and Presentation of Colors Parade 2023 in Abuja. That's that picture, the caption of that picture. But below that, restore local refining, says NLC, as FG halts subsidy removal. Timing should not be now, Finance Minister. It is commendable, TUC. Leave petrol subsidy removal for incoming government, CPPE. Well, you get the details of this story on page 5. One day, hopefully, the fuel subsidy story would be rested, and we can talk about subsidy in other areas of the Nigerian socio-economic space. Below that, FG files 9 fresh grounds opposing Nnamdi Kanu's release. Ground Supreme Court slates May 11 for the definite hearing and no conditions permanent. Ohaneze tells Buhari FG. Check page 11 for details of this story. Allegations of missing 48 million barrels of crude baseless, unfounded. That's Malami talking. Story is on page 8. There's a story I'll come back to, but just before that, 10th NAS leadership work with Adamu's NWC. Tinubu tells APC governors. Page 14. Buhari's government shouldn't be blamed for not bringing back Chibok girls, as coming from the presidency. It's on page 12. Remember, we had the spokesperson, one of the president's spokesmen here yesterday, and he was talking about how much effort was put in to bring back the Chibok girls, and the other ones will still be brought back. Sudan, Nigerian students trapped in desert. We talked about that earlier. Page 33 for details. Let's come back down to the bottom of the page. This you would like for the sports lovers. Utaka wants Pesero's job. Who's Utaka? The younger generation might not remember Utaka, but he played for Nigeria some time back, and now he's going through a coaching process to get his coaching licenses, and he's looking to coach Nigeria someday. That might be a good one. Let's hope that it works out for him. And Mr. and Mrs. And today being Friday, let's spice up today. Mrs. says, he was the man chasing me back in the village before I met you. Why are you this jealous? And Mrs. says, they said a bird at hand is worth $1 million in the bush. The man is a village champion. He's just a bird in the bush. Oh, boy. And that's it from the Vanguard.
Well, he justifies why he shouldn't be jealous. But, I mean, Nyota, I really envy the fact that you got to talk about the picture on the front page of the Vanguard newspapers. I mean, I played a very little role there yesterday. It was a real honor and privilege to witness a bit of history. That ceremony happens once every 15 to 20 years. That's a trooping of colors of the Nigerian Army. But take a look at Daily Trust here, and this is what they have on your front page. Tinubu settles for Akpabio Barao as Senate President Deputy. So, in case you've been wondering, where is this going to take us to, or where are they going to settle? This is what you're seeing on the front page. To convey decision to NWC, other contenders, meets APC governors, says, let's work together on NAS leadership. North can't be second fiddle, that's according to a former governor. Consultations ongoing for speaker, deputy positions. That story is on page 4. You also have a number of other stories at the bottom there. Sudan crisis. 1,500 Nigerian evacuees to arrive at Abuja today. That's attributed to the federal government. Returnees abandoned in desert over pay hitches. So they also have that story for you. Hundreds of Umrah pilgrims stranded in Saudi. So plenty of questions asked as to, what exactly are we doing? Why can't we plan things properly? Why? Page 26 is where you find details. They also have a number of other stories. Federal government says no vaccination as poultry farmers lose 3.4 million birds to flu. So if you've ever run a poultry before, my mother ran one once, and she lost how many birds when she had 1,000 birds, and I know how painful that was. So 3.4 million birds to flu. And federal government says the policy it's going to adopt is no vaccination. You might want to read the story on page 37 of the paper. This was also very heartbreaking to see. Tanker explosion kills 13, injured many in Jos. It's on page 34. And girl, 8 years old, tests HIV positive after mother's boyfriend raped her. We need to do better by our children and not expose them to this sort of thing. If we're interested in the story, page 20 will give details as to who the girl is, perhaps what state she is in, and perhaps, what help can come away, because this is what we're now seeing. An 8-year-old girl. Really very heartbreaking. Let's leave it there for Daily Trust newspapers.
And we'll leave it there for a look at what the papers are saying today. Sunrise Daily will take a moment and we will be back.
This is a place that our mothers and our sisters are living in the International University of Africa. You can see
a call for help from one of the many Nigerians caught in the violent conflict in Sudan as they camp in an open area at the International University of Africa in the capital, Khartoum.
So we have been pleading with the Federal Republic of Nigeria to help us so that we can get out of this place.
Help eventually came for them from the Nigerian government, as they were able to join the first batch of 13 buses which left for the Aswan border in Egypt on Wednesday. But even that journey wasn't as smooth.
Can you imagine that we are stuck in this desert for 4 and 5 hours?
She says the drivers stopped midway and wouldn't move until they received full payment, in spite of the federal government saying it had paid a total of $1.2 million to evacuate them.
The vehicle drivers, they said they are not moving their bus. They said they are not moving their buses because they don't give them money. Which type of attitude is this one? Look at this place, we are stuck in desert. We don't even have compass.
The chairman and CEO of the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, reacted to the video via a tweet saying, "Just spoke to NEMA Nigeria. They have started moving again. Whatever issues they have has been resolved." She also said the first batch is expected back home by Friday, but the evacuation is not without some challenges.
3,500 students, yes, but Nigerians are now coming, without even any documentation. So now say they want to come back. There's a lot of tension, there's a lot of desperation. So in fact, yesterday in the evacuation, because people who never even showed up wanted to even chance the students.
But there are over 1,000 Nigerians still waiting to be evacuated. Abubakar Sadiq is one of those left behind. He says there's been an airstrike in spite of a ceasefire. He fears that a ceasefire may not hold for much longer.
Around 4 p.m. today, while we are at the camp waiting for the embassy officials to arrive, and there is no presence of the embassy officials at the camp, we were waiting for them since 6 a.m. early in the morning. There is no update from them until now. There is no update from the embassy. Around 4 p.m. while we were waiting for them, there was an airstrike around our camp. It's just 1 kilometer or less away from us. And it was a terrible experience, actually. Very terrible experience.
For Abubakar and many others, they wait anxiously for a miracle, hoping to see their families back home soon. Kayode Okikiolu, Channels Television News.
And let's be clear about those updates based on the conversation we began with this morning. Idris Mohammed joins us this morning to have a conversation around this. He is SA to the DG NEMA. He joins us from Cairo, Egypt. Thank you for joining us this morning, Mr. Mohammed. Can you please give us an update? There are so many seemingly conflicting issues, let me put it that way. What is the clarity? We're hearing that the students are saying they have not been paid, but then there are issues that have been resolved. What are these issues, if you don't mind sharing? And what's the progress report?
Thank you very much for having me this morning. First and foremost, I want to appreciate the concerns expressed by Nigerians over the flight of our fellow citizens, especially the students caught up in the crisis in Sudan. I want to say that it is not a normal situation. It is an abnormal situation. It is a war going on. And therefore, it is very challenging, very difficult, a logistical nightmare. But I want to assure you that the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, the Nigeria Diaspora Commission, the Foreign Affairs Ministry, through the Nigerian embassies here in Egypt, in Cairo, where I am, and of course, the Nigerian embassy in Sudan, in Khartoum. They are working day and night. We don't sleep. You can see it from my face. Day and night, we are working to ensure that we have successfully brought back all Nigerians that are trapped in Sudan. The update this morning is that 13 buses are at the border between Sudan and Egypt. 9 are in Aegean, 4 in Wad Alpha. They are there awaiting for completion of clearance by the Sudanese authorities. Once these buses are cleared, they will start driving to Aswan, where there's an airport for the airlift back to Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport. And let me say that the drive from the border to Aswan is about 4 to 5 hours. And once they start driving, airpiece will be activated to start flying from Lagos. And it's almost the same time airpiece will arrive, and immediately the Nigeria embassy officials are there already on the ground to provide all necessary assistance to these returnees, and then make sure that they board the aircraft to fly them to Abuja. In Abuja, NEMA and all other partners have set up a reception center at the airport where they will be received, profiled, given all necessary spots, and then from there, everybody will move to his respective state, to his respective local government. And EOC has been activated at the NEMA headquarters, and we are monitoring the situation. We are constantly communicating with Sudan. We are communicating with people in Aswan, and we are communicating with Abuja. This is what we are doing.
Well, thank you. Again, let's just quickly emphasize the fact that the challenges you're having isn't a small one, and what you're doing is most certainly appreciated. And, of course, you cannot also remonstrate the concern that Nigerians have about the situation, for which reason, the issues are being raised. But when the students, communicated, put that word out yesterday that they were receiving information that there's been some payments that have been delayed, and consequently the drivers stopped in the middle of the journey, began to collect their documents as some kind of insurance to get their full payment. It definitely is concerning. That's where the issues arose from. Could you clear the air on that, exactly what happened in that situation, and what's the assurance that we'll not hear such from the students again?
I tell you, bus companies were engaged by the Nigeria embassy there in Khartoum. It is a very dicey situation. When you watch the CNN, you see aircrafts burning in the airports in Khartoum. Not everybody is willing to put his assets into a war situation like this. I tell you, we have every credibility. Payments have been made depending on the contractual agreement between our embassy in Sudan and the transportation company, and they are moving. You see, you are bound to hear all kinds of stories, but the truth is that NEMA and all the partners, Foreign Affairs Ministry, the embassies, we have done this evacuation before, and the hallmark of this kind of operation is the transparency and accountability. And I am assuring you that this evacuation process is going to happen smoothly. We are doing everything possible. Yes, there are challenges, but I tell you, nobody is going to shortchange anybody in respect of finance, in respect of any logistical arrangement. Our focus is that we want to make sure that every Nigerian student that is stranded in Sudan is not left behind. It's brought back to Nigeria successfully. That is the position.
Well, some of your, clarifications are soothing this morning. But also, Mr. Mohammed, there's a nighttime video of some students sent down in which they're appealing for the federal government to come and evacuate them from their campuses. So amid the even though the ceasefire has been extended, there are still reports of gunshots being heard and fighting in some other parts of Sudan. How assuring is it that their evacuation from their campus through to Aswan, the border with Egypt, will be smooth sail?
Number one, as you mentioned, the good news is that the ceasefire has been extended to 72 hours. That's about 3 days. And there are certain things that are not under our control. But as the situation unfolds, our embassy staff in Sudan, and of course they are working with other partners, they are doing everything possible to explore possible avenues of bringing out these students to a holding center. From there, move them inside the buses, provide necessary escorts back into Egypt for the subsequent evacuation. I tell you, we are doing everything possible. The Nigerian ambassador here in Egypt, the Sudanese ambassador here there in Sudan, and all his members of staff, all their members of staff are on the ground. Additional support is coming from Abuja, the NEMA staff, the Diaspora Commission, the Minister of Humanitarian Affairs are coming to support this initiative. Additionally, I assure you that we're in constant communication with Sudan, and this operation is going to happen successfully. We have done it before. Okay. During the Ukraine crisis, there was a crescendo like this, but we brought back Nigerians back home in a safe and dignified manner, and I'm assuring you that we are going to do it once more.
Okay, Mr. Mohammed, if I may come in here, it's a good thing, like my colleague said earlier, that you clarified on some of the issues raised as regards payments and all. You say payments have been made clearly, but just because the thought that's bothering me, why would you think that Nigerians who are in an emergency situation would come up, like you saw in the video that was posted and sent to us, rather, that the drivers are insisting that they've not received their monies and so they will not move? Why do you think they want to put that out there, if indeed they have been paid, as you say?
You see, here we are in constant communication with the Nigerian embassy in Khartoum, Sudan. And I want to assure you that you can hear all kinds of stories. But the truth of the matter is that, take it from me, no any bus driver or any company should change when it comes to their making payment for transporting people to Egypt. I'm sure of that.
Okay, so you're also assuring us that those buses that stopped in the middle of nowhere have continued the journey, they've left that space?
We got the clearance. Since yesterday in the night, those buses have left that location. They have started, as I'm talking to you, but these buses are in the border area between Sudan and Egypt. They are being cleared by the Sudanese authorities. Once they are cleared, they start their movement to Aswan airport.
Are there any other buses that are going to leave Sudan today or maybe tomorrow with other Nigerians, or have all Nigerians moved?
In fact, we are looking at a few hours from now, they will start their movement.
Okay.
We are expecting the evacuation. The first aircraft is going to land in Abuja today, God willing.
Can you tell us the total number of Nigerians that you are evacuating between yesterday and today, students and other citizens of Nigeria?
Today we're expecting that about 500 to 600 Nigerians will arrive as one. That's the first batch of buses that are coming in. Others are being arranged; they're in transit. So as the situation unfolds, we keep on giving an updated statement through our emergency operations center in Abuja.
Okay, well, we'll certainly look forward to their arrival here in Abuja today. And we have to also ask about others that are left, because we know that the initial figure, which we were told, was 5,500 Nigerian students especially. And we know that they're going to be moving in batches. Now, there were also reports that some of them were left behind in Khartoum. Can you clarify that to us?
Yes, like I said, I'm here in Cairo, and the information we have from our embassy in Sudan is that 3,600 students have been profiled for evacuation through Egypt. And out of this 3,600, like I said, a lot of them are already inside buses. Some are by the border, some are still in transit. By constant communication with the Sudanese embassy. And profiling is a continuous process, of course. There are several students in educational institutions, in several locations in Sudan. So it's a very complex situation, but as the information we get from Sudan, we keep feeding this information to the national EOC and keep on updating our records. But for now, we are working with 3,600 Nigerians. 3,000. That's the figure we have for now.
That's 3,600. Is it in Khartoum or on their way to Egypt?
Some are in Khartoum, some are in transit.
Okay. All right. So can you tell us really why this situation arose in terms of payment? Because it really was heartbreaking to see that sort of video, and students... will I say, complaining in the middle of the desert that they had been, that their buses stopped midway, or students even complaining that they were abandoned. What gave rise to that situation in the first instance?
Like I said, people are traumatized. People are not happy. They have seen, most of us have not seen war. So you can imagine a student doing his normal studies and then suddenly he finds himself. If you compare the situation like what happened in Ukraine, when the Russians are amassing weapons in the border areas, everybody is anticipating a crisis. But under this situation, it's like the whole world was caught unaware. And therefore, people can be traumatized. People can make all kinds of complaints. But information I've given you is information that is certified based on our communication with the Nigerian embassy in Sudan. I tell you, there is no bus that is stranded now. All buses are in transit.
Yes.
Those that have reached the border are going through process of profiling for necessary security before they start.
Yeah, so while we can concede that indeed anyone caught in a war situation will certainly feel an amount of trauma, it doesn't explain why buses will stop in the middle of the desert. It doesn't explain why people will say that, drivers are refusing to move until they have been paid. So what exactly is the situation? What was the situation initially?
I'm in Cairo here. I'm in communication with the Nigerian embassy. There is nothing like buses have stopped in the middle of the desert because they have not been paid. There's no report like that. I'm telling you this.
You didn't receive any such report?
There are social media posts, all kinds of stories. But I'm telling you the authentic story as we receive information from our embassy in Sudan.
Well, you just said here earlier, before Mark came in, that the buses had been moved from that space yesterday evening. And now you say no buses were stopped?
No. I said no buses were stopped because payment has not been made to them. Along the line, if a convoy of buses is driving, something might have made them to make a stopover. But then, yesterday in the night, we received clearance that this is the same buses that we are saying that are already in the border area now. So if they are stuck, they couldn't have been in the border area between Sudan and Egypt. The same buses.
You know, Mr. Mohammed, your explanation is far from sufficient because you say that no buses were stopped because they were shortchanged. But there's a difference between being shortchanged and not being paid. And I wonder if it is believable that, you know, the students will make that video because they're traumatized or rather because, you know, of the fear of being in the middle of nowhere. I wish you could provide a more sufficient explanation, you know, for what happened and for why we saw that video. But apart from that, you say we are working with 3,600 Nigerians, but the chairperson of NIDCOM also said yesterday that more Nigerians are coming who did not initially register. And if reports are anything to go by also from her, there's a higher population, a higher number of Nigerians in Sudan. So how does NEMA have the capacity to deal with this logistical challenge? And then just for you to also clarify that, you know, will Air Peace be ferrying all 3,600 or will the federal government be also intervening in airlifting Nigerians back home?
Thank you very much. Like I said to you earlier, the 3,600 figure that we're working with, the list of students has been sent to us here in Cairo. But more profiling is going on, and the figures are definitely going to change. As I'm talking to you right now, the figures might have changed. And this is happening at the background of the fact that Nigerians in Sudan is a very historical thing. There's a big population of Nigerians, people originally Nigerians that migrated to Sudan. And also, of course, there are a lot of scholars in several institutions in Sudan over the years. So a situation like this is definitely expected. I think what all these agencies that are involved in this evacuation process demand is all the support of the Nigerian public, including the media especially. I want to assure you that NEMA, NIDCOM, Foreign Affairs are doing everything possible for the success of this evacuation. And in respect of Air Peace, of course, as more people are coming, additional aircrafts may be chartered from other companies to come and support this evacuation process. For now, Air Peace is giving us this support as part of their corporate social responsibility to Nigerians. Very commendable. They have done it before. They have done it in South Africa earlier. And as more people are getting profiled, are getting transported, I assure you that a lot of other opportunities will be explored so that nobody will be stranded in the airport in Aswan. You cannot bring somebody that's stranded in Sudan and then bring him to Egypt and let him for him to get stranded once more. We are on top of the situation. I want to assure you.
Just a quick clarification, Mr. Mohammed. What can you tell us about the status of the ceasefire?
I cannot say much about warring factions or what they are doing among themselves, but like you earlier mentioned, 72-hour ceasefire has been granted by the warring factions, and we are working very hard to make sure that during that window of opportunity we have had, a lot of people are going to be profiled and then transported into Egypt. Other nationals, other countries too are doing their efforts, but I tell you, of all the countries that are doing evacuation, there is no country that is bringing out a large number of people like Nigeria. That's the truth of the matter.
Well, we have to thank you very much for your time and for all that you're doing to make our nation proud and keep our citizens safe as they make their way back home. Idris Mohammed, SA, to the DG of NEMA. Thank you so much for your time and illumination this morning.
Thank you for having me. I want to assure you that we do everything possible to bring back our citizens in a dignified manner, in a safe and dignified manner. Thank you very much.
Safe and dignified. We'll hold you by that. We're back after now. For more, please stay with us.
what I said is that it is not going to be removed now, which means it will not be removed before the transition is completed. That's what it means. But then we have two laws that have inadvertently made the provision that we should exit by June. So if the committee's work, which will include the representatives of the incoming administration, determine that the removal can be done by June, then the work plan will be designed to exit as of June. But if the determination is that the period needs to be extended, it will mean that we will have, as a country, will have to revisit the Appropriation Act, for example, because the 2023 budget only made provision up to June. So if we're extending beyond June, it means we have to revisit the Appropriation Act and do a supplementary or amend the bill, and also the PIA. We that are here now are going to do the work with the representatives of the incoming administration, and we will exit and leave them to continue with the implementation of the plan. And so there will be an expanded committee so that it is not just a few people's thoughts that will guide the process, that there is sufficient consultation, taking inputs from key stakeholders into the measures that need to be taken.
Well, the resolution of the National Economic Council to put the fuel subsidy removal on hold for now is already, as would be expected, generating responses, reactions from all quarters. More on that this morning. Let's have this conversation with Peter Esele, who is a former president of the TUC. He's former president of Pengasan, and he joins us from Benin City, along with Dr. Muda Yusuf, who is founder and chief executive officer, Center for Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE. He's past DG, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning.
Well, let me begin with you, Mr. Esele. Is this in any way disappointing for you? Is it a shock that you are receiving this news that fuel subsidy is being put on hold for now?
Good morning, and thank you for having me. I don't think so. It's not a shock to me at all. It's something that I expected. And I think you and I have had this conversation before in one of your shows on the weekend. And I said, for you to take away subsidy, there are certain things that I think the government should do. And I don't think they have done it. First, you have to have the political will, and then you also have the political capital. And I think this government would have done, if they want to remove subsidy, it would have been done in the first 1 year of this administration, where they have huge political capital to expend. And since they didn't do it, what we've had over the years is been kicking the can down the road. So for me, this is not a surprise at all.
Is it a costly move, or is just one of those things that we have to suck up?
Yes, I think what they should have done, I don't think NEC should have gone this far of having this discussion or this conversation when they started in the last quarter of last year, talking about subsidy removal, because there are two things you need to identify here. There is the economics of the economy, and then there is the political economics of the economy. So it is for you to find the balance between the economics of the economy and the political economics of the economy, then you can now move ahead to take away the subsidy. But the government have been lacking in that direction. They've not been able to get the balance. It's going to be costly in the terms that international community, the investors will be looking at the government as, can we do anything with this government because of the policy inconsistency and the policy flip-flop? So that also now become a challenge. It is costly from the idea of perception of what government stands for, which means when the government talks, you expect the government should have done its homework before addressing the public. So when this happened, you now have trust deficit.
And I don't even think that trust deficit is anything that we are working as seriously or assiduously towards, it would seem. And Mr. Yusuf, Dr. Yusuf, beg your pardon, when we hear government, I mean, it sounds so utopian, so grandiose. But then here we are talking about the same issue again. Yesterday we were talking about the power sector, you know, in the entire energy spectrum. And today we are talking about fuel subsidy removal. How did that conversation or the news, how did it come across to you, Dr. Yusuf?
Yeah, thank you very much, Tayo. First of all, let me say that my understanding of what the minister said was not that it has been suspended. That is not my understanding of what she said. Because the position before now is that a provision has been made for subsidy up until June. And what the minister said was that the subsidy will not be removed immediately. That it will not be removed before the transition. That can only happen after the transition. So effectively, nothing has changed.
I don't understand, Dr. Yusuf.
Because the essence of...
Just a second, Dr. Yusuf.
The essence of what she said was that
just to be clear,
the incoming administration...
It was, just to be clear...
that will take this decision.
My sincere apologies. Just to be clear, hitherto, even before this year, the information available in the public space from the same minister is that the subsidy removal process will begin in June. That conversation was made last year, and June is after this administration. So there is no way the government could have effected it at the time, or I don't, maybe help us understand.
Ayo, the provision that was made in the budget was to have a subsidy to cover up until June. And the amendment to the PIA, which the minister also reiterated in her statement yesterday, was that this will end in June. So it is after June that you can begin to talk about whether this subsidy will stay or will not stay. And she said it that this subsidy will not be removed before the transition. In other words, it's going to take place after the transition. So she has not said anything new.
But Mr.
She has not said that it has been suspended.
Mr. Yusuf, Dr. Yusuf, pardon me if I may come in there. Let me quote what the Minister of Finance said, because it is hugely suggestive of what is to come. She said, so this will require looking at alternatives to the fuel subsidy that needs to be planned for and subsequently put in place, but also what needs to be done to support the people that will be most affected as a result of the removal. And those things, as rightly pointed out by Mr. Esele, have not been put in place. The refineries are still not working. That's just one. And, you know, the excess crude account is down. So there are so many things that are not put in place. So are you saying that because we still have a legal document, i.e. the 2023 Appropriation Act, that the incoming administration will go ahead and remove the subsidy, or what she has said is a huge hint of what is to come after May 29?
You see, the removal of subsidy will have to come with a whole lot of things. We have been talking about palliatives. We have been talking about measures to be taken, medium, short-term, long-term. A whole lot of issues will come together with it. And the point is that it is for the incoming administration to come up with its own strategy. Because this requires a very holistic strategy to move from the current position of a subsidy to a post-subsidy regime. We have had it with this administration, it didn't work. We had it with the administration before it didn't work. But the point I'm making is that the whole debate about this subsidy is something that will have to be determined by the next administration. What is before us now is that there is a provision for subsidy up until June. So whatever will happen to the subsidy will depend on what the new administration is putting on the table. The current administration cannot be deciding for the incoming administration.
But Dr. Yusuf,
as to how this subsidy will be managed.
But Dr. Yusuf, would you be surprised if the incoming administration announces upon swearing in that subsidy cannot be removed in the short term?
That is left to the incoming administration. Just as Peter said, a whole lot of things will have to go into this decision. There is the economics of it, there's the politics of it. But the reality is that this economy cannot continue to carry the weight of the subsidy going forward.
Yes, that is left for the incoming administration. But Dr. Yusuf, would you be surprised if the incoming administration announces upon swearing in that subsidy cannot be removed for now?
Well, I will not be surprised.
So has the Buhari administration giving the incoming administration a soft landing where subsidy is concerned?
Well, we cannot be talking about soft landing because the soft landing will depend on the total package that the administration puts forward, especially the incoming administration. We have been talking about the issue of palliatives. They have been talking about this $800 million. There are palliatives around issues of transportation, around issues of food inflation, around so many things. The use of gas, for instance, conversion of vehicles from PMS to gas, conversion of generators from diesel to gas. There are a whole lot of things that should come together, and this will form the total package that will come with the subsidy. But if you continue to insist that so many conditions have to be met before this subsidy is removed, then we may put the economy in a great danger. Because already we are in the threshold of insolvency. The government is technically insolvent. We just read a report of the World Bank saying that over 90% of revenue is used to service debt.
But Dr. Yusuf, this drives deep at the heart of distrust for the incoming administration as far as subsidy is concerned, because its disposition, but its disposition, upon takeoff in 2014 was that subsidy is a scam, but we've had subsidy for the last 8 years. So, how comfortable are you with, its policy on subsidy based on this?
Oh no, you see, it is also a very wrong statement to make that subsidy is a scam. There's a scam component in subsidy, but the reality is that the landing cost today is far higher than the pump price. That is the reality. Let anybody test the model. Let anybody go and import fuel and see whether you can sell it at 185 or 200 and make any profit from it. But the long and short of this is that this is a problem that we have to deal with. This is something that is not sustainable, and we need to have a holistic strategy of dealing with it, which will involve engagement with all the stakeholders. But we should not be putting conditions that are not realistic. Otherwise, the entire economy will go down. That is the danger that we face. Look at what is happening to Ghana. We don't want to look at what is happening to our rating by credit agencies. Our rating now is very low.
We have just one other person joining us in our Abuja studio, Mr. Sele and Dr. Yusuf. We'll take this conversation, expand this conversation with our guest in Abuja. Nyata.
Thank you very much, Ayo. And we have here Showumi Olabode, a group of experts on gas, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, a senior legislative aide on gas and power to the Senate President, and Chairman, New Energies and Hydrogen Study Group of NGA. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Showumi.
Thank you. Good morning. Always a pleasure.
You are in the mix of gas and the petroleum industry and all of that. You've heard from our colleagues, from our guests in Lagos, Peter Sele, former president of the TUC, and Dr. Muda Yusuf, founder, CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise. and all that they put forth. I mean, you've heard the economics of the economy. But I'd like to take it from that angle where the Minister of Finance mentioned that there are 2 laws that insist or point in the direction of subsidy removal completely. But if that has to happen, it has to be with the new administration. The new administration will have to decide. For one who has always spoken about the need for a cleanup of the petroleum sector in Nigeria, what do you think?
Thank you. I think first and fundamentally, we need to look at the basics, because really, even when you call somebody an expert, he's actually a master of the basics. And there are not too many great things that are going to solve it. We're just going to take it bit by bit, but do it well. The devil is always in the details. So there is an economic part to the subsidy, and there is a political part to it. I mean, and that applies to anything economic, because many people seem to forget that all politics end with economics. I mean, if there are no economics, there will be no politics. And all economic issues have politics associated with it. In fact, the great school in England, the London School of Economics, the full name is actually London School of Economics and Political Science. So there is always a political aspect to all economic issues. So when we talk about subsidy removal, the economics speaks for itself in terms of the fact that we have this huge budget that goes into it and all that. But there is also the political aspect, the political part, which is the fact that it has significant capacity to affect the lives of everyone and almost instantly. So at the end of the day, you can do the right thing, but it can trigger unrest, because basically the figures that are coming out because of the devaluation of the naira is going to lead to galloping inflation. I mean, and it starts the day it is removed. The man with the transportation is going to jack up his price. The woman on the street selling tomato is going to jack up her price. The landlord is going to respond. So there will be spiraling effect. So even if people know that this is the right thing, the issue will now be, do they have the capacity, you understand, to endure the right thing? And there are certain fundamentals that need to be in place, which is really where the issues are. The first thing is that the figures, the economics that speak to subsidy itself need to be made transparent to everyone and easily verifiable. The key word being transparency and verification. So, and the second thing is that they need to liberalize totally those who have capacity to import. So it's not going to be the old boys brigade. So anyone should really be able to import these things. And the figures, the statistics of those importing it needs to be made available real time and online. That way, civil society can question it and all that. The third aspect of it is that government, as part of their own, need to have a systemic and systematic advocacy and education program that will reach out to the bottom of the pyramid. Not to the middle class, obviously, and not to the elite. So we are talking about education in local languages at the local government area to let them know the impact and the import of subsidy and what needs to be done. So when you combine the fact that people know and see that the figures associated with subsidy are going to be administered and removed in a way that they know that nobody is benefiting from it, it is easier to endure. So it is the fact that there's a lot of all these, the opaque nature of subsidy removal that is at the basis and the root of the distrust. So there needs to be significant and total transparency in the process.
Now, some would argue that that transparency in the petroleum industry was supposed to have been helped with the passage of the petroleum industry law, but it looks like it's more opaque now than before even the PIA came into operation. So if you're now saying that the fundamentals that need to be in place, first you mentioned transparency. That has been an issue. Why has transparency been an issue in that sector? And then you are calling for it again before. In other words, the subsidy may not go anywhere eventually.
Okay, so when it comes to administration of governance, there are laws, there are policies, and then, of course, there should be consequence management. So basically, laws can only do so much in terms of providing a structure and a framework. But when it comes to brass tacks, yes, you need policies. So what the Petroleum Industry Act has done is create the framework for transparency. But you still need those policies and activities. For example, there is no law that says your activities must be online. But you can create a policy that says the activities as it relates to the subsidy must be online and real time. You know, that totally puts spanners in the works for anybody with an ulterior motive, because it is always difficult when things are in the open. So the issue, why that is important, is that at the roots strikes a dagger at all the issues of lack of trust in governance. And the government does need it. So the issue will now be a question for governance. What do they really want to achieve with subsidy? Because there are ways to get this subsidy implemented without the distrust of people. And trust me, if people are certain that what they are suffering for is not for the benefit of a few people who may be corrupt, their capacity to endure significantly increases.
And I think that takes me back to Mr. Esele. I'm very interested in what he said, talking about two things that were needed to be able to successfully remove subsidy. He talked about political will and political capital. He said if the administration was going to take away subsidy, that this particular administration, they should have done it in the first year of their first tenure, that's sometime in 2015, between 2015 and 2016. And so I'm wondering, right now, they've moved this, the minister has said this is going to, you know, we're going to still hold on to subsidy until after the transition, and maybe it is the new administration that will inherit that conundrum. I'm just wondering, do you think that the incoming administration, when we look at what happened during the elections, do you think that they'll have sufficient political capital to be able to expend on such an adventurous project such as the removal of fuel subsidy, considering just how the elections went?
Well, it has to do with how the incoming administration is able to communicate its policies. Because first thing, why I made that reference is that when you are elected, like the Buhari administration was elected with such a huge wave that it would have been very easy for him to go ahead and say he's taking off subsidy. He actually had 3 windows, and those 3 windows, he blew it. And then as a result, that was why I keep saying in some of your programs that I never foresaw them taking away subsidy. Now, what do I expect of the incoming administration? The president-elect, he is the first president. When he's sworn in, he will become the first president to have campaigned directly that he was going to take off subsidy. So if you campaign that you are going to take off subsidy, then you now have to tell us the means by which you are going to do it. And then it now becomes an option for us to have a conversation around it. Is it doable? And if you are going to do it, how long is it going to take? I have always been an advocate of a phased subsidy removal. Now, if the incoming administration comes in and says, I'm going to take away subsidy, we are going to do it gradually, maybe 30% annually, and then you cascade it down, let everybody be aware, and then you also know what are the challenges that will come. That's one. Then the other aspect why I was so happy that the outgoing administration just need to go quietly without touching anything was that initially I was worried when they said they were taking $800 million. You don't take $800 million and you share it to 50 million household, and then you're on your way out. No, because there are going to be consequence management, just as your guest in Abuja had made reference, as alluded to. So what do you do about that? So what I expect incoming administration to do is first, look at the state of the economy. Yes, I agree with Dr. Yusuf that the economy is in a straitjacket. We've not started yet. Now you look at the state of the economy, then you also now come up based on what you campaigned on, that, okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to deal with the economy. And then you also have to look at effects, because all of these that we are talking about, it has to be an omnibus plan. When I use the word omnibus plan, is that CBN is not going to make, if you liberalize, CBN is not going to make FX available for the marketers to import. So how are the marketers going to source FX? You have to address that. And if CBN is not making it available, the parallel market goes for 735. So even at CBN rates right now, I will tell you that the price of PMS should be between 320 and 400 naira. So if you go ahead and you now decide that you are liberalizing without laying the foundation, and then the marketers now have to go to the black market to source for FX, then you can buy a liter of petrol as high as 700 naira. That's what I'm talking about, minibus plan. And then you also look at the workers, both formal and informal sector. How are they going to cope under the galloping inflation? What are the low-hanging fruits that you have to pick to mitigate whatever is coming? So I keep emphasizing. Now, look at what this administration have just done. The current one, you've increased salaries. They are negotiating, you have increased salaries. What are you getting for salary increase? You know,
well, Mr. Saleh, I think it's also very important to clarify, because civil servants are saying that that salary increment should be ignored. I don't think that they are either satisfied or maybe they're yet to see it in their payment slips. I don't know what the situation is, but that's the news that we're getting today, that that increment should be ignored. But I'm wondering, because it would seem that everybody is talking about importation as the alternative, and it does appear you have been in labor union, you headed the TUC for a long while, and amongst the labor unions, it would seem that there is no, I don't want to say synchronization, that's not the word to use, because all the labor unions are independent of each other, even though they sometimes come together. But it doesn't appear that they're singing from the same hymn sheet. TUC, which is also headed by somebody who is from Pengassan, you know, seems to be saying, yes, remove subsidy, we will go with that plan. But NLC is saying very clearly that we hope importation is not what you're hoping to do if you take it away. You know, it is very dicey here. So I'm wondering, how do you think that would work? That if the federal government is to remove subsidy and still rely on importation, NLC is saying, no, that cannot be the plan.
The beauty of the labor movement is that we never agree. We never agree from the onset. Is that everybody has his own views. If you take, for example, if you ask Pengassan will prefer subsidy removal from yesterday. And then you also have NUPEN. They also feel the same way. But when we are all together, when you have NSC, you have TUC, you have NUPEN, and everybody now comes together, is that you now have to look at what is mutually beneficial. You know, I don't belong to the school of saying win-win. No. The school of mutual benefit, mutual interest, it makes it easier for everybody to defend what is agreed on. So NSC will say, oh, they don't want it to be based on importation, but whether you like it or not, we are still going to be importing. And I don't see that importation coming to an end this year. My initial confidence was that if the Dangote refinery come up this year, maybe last quarter of this year, then it's possible that importation will stop. But I don't see Dangote refinery coming up towards maybe 2024 or early 2025. It's still going to be a long shot for the Dangote refinery to come up. So the NSC, TUC, NUPEN, Pengassan, just don't worry yourself about that. That is the beauty of the labor movement. They would have to come to a meeting. They also have to come to an agreement. But what the government must do, based on what the information you've just given now, is that you are talking about salary increase. Even the workers have not yet agreed with you. So my stake on this is that the incoming administration must have a minibus plan, but it must try not just to communicate. The incoming administration must communicate effectively. If it doesn't communicate effectively, then we may just have a crisis on our hands.
Well, let me come to Mr. Modu Yusuf. I am just wondering how the private sector is looking at this particular matter, looking at the fact that importation will most likely still be an alternative. I'm wondering first, how do you think that removal is going to hit you? Well, maybe hit all of us because we are all there. But, you know, what's the concern for manufacturers in that space? Are they also, or are they looking to participate in that sector when it is effectively liberalized?
Yes, those in the private sector, particularly the manufacturers, are already taking a very big hit because, when you look at the energy consumption from the manufacturing sector, the bulk of it is coming from diesel or gas, and diesel has been long deregulated. So already, a good part of the private sector is already feeling the heat of a deregulated component of the energy sector, which is diesel. If you also look at the aviation sector, they are taking a very big hit with the aviation fuel, which has already been deregulated. So to some extent, there is already an exposure to the deregulation regime. When you look at diesel, you look at kerosene, you look at aviation fuel, and to some extent, even gas. So that exposure is there. But the reality is that for us to transit from where we are to where we want to be, which is to ensure adequate local refining, this deregulation or removal of subsidy is a major first step. Because you cannot attract private investors into this very important space if you continue with this subsidy. And if there is anything we need very urgently and very badly, it is investment in that sector. Because it is unpardonable that we are in a sector, we have been in this sector for close to 60 years, and yet we don't have robust private sector investment. And this is a sector that has huge opportunities, both to meet domestic demand and for export. But the sector has been practically crippled or paralyzed by this policy. So we need to exit from this, and we cannot afford to continue to leave this sector in the hands of the public sector. This is not to diminish the capacity of the public sector, but the reality is that the bureaucracy and the political environment is such that you cannot afford to leave this sector in their hands. This is what has brought us to where we are. We have 4 refineries for almost a decade. The refineries have not functioned. And we have spent so much money.
Dr. Yusuf,
cannot continue that way.
Dr. Yusuf, real quick, because we're really running out of time. I would want to bring in Mr. Shomi here, but to you first, what advice would you give the incoming administration in terms of quick wins, things that can be done immediately? You've talked about the fact that removing of the subsidy is a major first step that needs to be taken in order to build the kind of local industry, refining and dispensing that you talked about.
Well, just as Peter said and the other guests, it has to be a holistic approach. There has to be engagement. And because of the level of oil price now in the global market, it is not practical to remove everything at a go. The shock on the citizens will be unbearable. So there has to be an engagement on the phased removal of it. There has to be engagement on what kind of palliatives. And when I'm talking about palliatives, I'm not just talking about handouts. How can we use tariff policy, for instance, to bring down a whole lot of costs? How can we use tariff policy and other policies to encourage the migration of the use of energy from PMS to gas, from diesel to gas? How can we use tariff policy to bring down food inflation? So it has to be a combination of a whole lot of things to make sure that we bring down the level of cost of living, to ensure better transition, and to ensure that the shock on the citizens are not too much for them to bear. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, Mr. Shomi, tariff policy, engagement with the Nigerian people at all levels to see how to bring down the cost of living, to bring down the galloping inflation that was likely to happen when subsidy is eventually removed. Low-hanging fruit that can be picked up immediately and move this country forward.
Well, it's nice to talk about things on the other side in terms of what they should do. But to my mind, I think the first thing the government needs to do is to understand the subsidy itself. So people need to make presentations to them so that they can understand and internalize the figures.
1 second, please. I mean, are you implying that after all these years, government doesn't understand the subsidy? Remember, this conversation around subsidy is not something that started today. There were even protests when Goodluck Jonathan was there, President Goodluck Jonathan.
So let me say something. We were told that subsidy were removed twice during the last administration. Dr. Kachiku came on TV and went to say that there was under-recovery. That was when that lexicon, that word was introduced into our dictionary. So basically, there were statistics on which subsidy was removed and which it was no longer subsidized that was not made public. So you remember the first thing I said was that there needs to be transparency and the ability to verify figures. So those figures that are not in the open, the government needs to understand it. I mean, if I'm going to make a decision, I need to understand the full implication of what I'm deciding. Subsidy is not difficult to calculate. It is basically the landing cost, which, and how do you calculate that? There's a cost of crude oil, it's an international price. The cost of transportation to the refinery is international price. A cost of refining, you can even Google that, it's international price, and the cost back. So you know what your landing cost is per time.
The problem is the quantity. It's the volume.
With the volume, you get
we've been unable to agree on, how much Nigeria is truly consuming. Now we're getting figures as high as 80 million liters, which has been contested by even the Customs Service.
So that is a different issue entirely. You get. So that comes to the issue of
transparency.
No, law enforcement and all that. Because as a technical person, or as the industry itself, you are not responsible for law enforcement. You understand? But what we are speaking to is the economics of it. And it is the economics of it, it is on the basis for which the subsidy is calculated. So the government, the new government, needs to understand this figure, including the figures that are not in the open. And then those figures, after they've internalized it, need to be made public in a way that people can verify it.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Shomi Olabode, member Group of Experts on Gas, United Nations Economic Commission for Europe, and Chairman, New Energies and Hydrogen Study Group of the NGA. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much.
Aya, over to you.
One of the questions that I would love to ask Mr. Olabode before we had to let him go is it important for us to have a plan? The subsidy regime started in the 70s, maybe because we don't have a transition plan for it. So, Dr. Yusuf, do you think that is something that should be considered? To have an exit plan for subsidy towards which we can work and then ensure that we keep a timeline on as we wrap up? Dr. Yusuf, that's for you. Okay, well, I don't know if Mr. Esele can take that up. Well, Dr. Yusuf, we can see you now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Well,
I said that, yes, we should have an exit plan. I mean, that's a no-brainer. I mean, there should be an exit plan. That is what we are talking about.
So you don't think there is an exit plan right now?
No. There is no concrete plan on ground.
Okay.
No concrete plan. The whole thing has been left to the incoming administration to be able to do. Okay. And the exit plan has to incorporate all the issues that have been raised, including ensuring there is competition. Because right now we have a monopoly situation, which is compounding the problem that we have on ground.
Okay. Well, Mr. Esele, what's your take? Do you think we should have an exit plan for this subsidy removal that we've been talking about for ages? Started well in the 70s, but if there is going to be an exit plan, according to you, what should it be? What should the content be, and how long do you think it should take?
I think there should be an exit plan. And I think the incoming administration should be the last administration where we go about discussing subsidy. It has to set that boundaries that the administration will close that subsidy once and for all. Then it has to give us the plan of how it intends to do it. But we should have an exit. Enough. It's embarrassing that we've had democracy since 1999. We've been discussing subsidy. I think it's an embarrassment. We need to put a closure to it. Thank you.
It's a good place to bring the conversation to a close. Peter Esele, former president of Trade Union Congress and former president, Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association, Pengasan. Thank you so much for your time, as well as Dr. Muda Yusuf, founder and CEO, Center for the Promotion of Private Enterprise, CPPE. He's also past DG of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, LCCI. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me.
So we're back with the final leg of our conversation this morning with you. Do stay with us.
Some identities cannot be mistaken, you know, like your business name and your account name. Your business name if you be shoot place, then the account now, color carry me. If I see him, I block him straight. You don't understand? Don't confuse your customers. Sign up for a Money Point business account today and get a business account in your business name in minutes from your shop banker. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Whatever it takes to make sure you have a business account opened in your business name, we'll do it as your sure banker. Open a bank account in your business name with Money Point.
Ovieme.
Oh, I wish you were here.
I'm always with you.
But it's not the same without you.
MTN 5G's amazing technology will change how we experience life and the internet. Get ready to encounter the incredible. And remember, no be juju, na MTN 5G.
Western Delta University at 15. Western Delta University, Ogara, Delta State, one of the foremost private universities in the southern part of Nigeria, clocks 15 years. While celebrating this milestone, the university will play host to important dignitaries across Nigeria. The Founders Day lecture on the topic Subnational Governance, the Ekiti example, will be delivered by His Excellency Dr. Kayode Fayemi, former Governor Ekiti State, under the distinguished chairmanship of His Excellency Dr. Emmanuel Eweta Odwana, former Governor of Delta State. The highlight of the occasion will be the presentation of awards to individuals who have contributed to the growth of the university, distinguished alumni, and people that have served the university meritoriously. Date is Saturday, 29th April 2023. Venue is the main auditorium, kilometer 10, Benin Sapler Road, Ogara. Time is 10 a.m. Western Delta University, Ogara. Knowledge for human advancement.
The President, Trade Union Congress of Nigeria, Comrade Festus Osifo, on behalf of the National Executive Council and the entire working people in Nigeria, welcomes invited guests to the maiden edition of the annual Nigerian Workers' Dinner and Award Night. Theme, Celebrating the Wealth Creators. Venue, International Conference Center, Abuja. Date, Saturday, April 29th, 2023. An event to celebrate outstanding Nigerian workers and employers of labor in public and private sectors as part of the 2023 TUC Pre-May Day celebration activities. Keynote speaker, Dr. Habiba Muda Lawal, former Permanent Secretary, SGF Office. Chairman of the occasion, Comrade Adams Aliyu Oshomole, former President, Nigeria Labour Congress and former Governor, Edo State. Red carpet starts 6 p.m. and dinner 7 p.m. Come and let's celebrate Nigerian workers who toil day and night to create our national wealth. Comrade Nuhu Toro, Secretary General, TUC, signed.
It's the second time officials of the National Population Commission are meeting with development partners, the diplomatic corps and members of the private sector as preparations for the National Housing and Population Census continues. In a few months of the census, it appears there are a few grey areas to be covered.
The number one challenge is funding. Number two challenge is actually funding. Number three challenge is funding. And then number four, security. There are a couple of cultural issues that we also need to deal with.
Although there are pockets of insecurity where the National Population Commission conducted the enumeration area demarcation in some local governments, the chairman of the National Population Commission allays fears that the exercise may not hold in some communities as he calls for support.
In addition to Abadan, there are a few local governments. We've done the fiscal area demarcation, but there are some areas like in Bidingwari, we couldn't get the entire local government. So we use the hybrid there too, and as well as a few local government in Zamfara. So, and this hybrid is as good as our people going into the field.
Representatives of development organizations lend a hand of support for the exercise, highlighting its significance to national development.
How do we make all of these wise decisions for the betterment of this country? It's been said by many of you, Nigeria needs evidence. We need to know, what does this great country look like? We need to understand that everyone counts. We need to understand that if we don't know that, we will continue to make a lot of hit and possibly a lot of miss in our decision making.
One of the objectives of the meeting is how to source for funds for the national exercise, and the National Population Commission is promising to manage the funds in a transparent manner.
Now it's time to talk about that matter. Census have happened around the world over time. It's almost as old as man himself, or humanity itself. Censuses have been happening, but that of Nigeria, the 2023 census, is starting out on the 3rd of May. That's a date that has been fixed. But the question is, what do the population, as we speak now, know about the census? What do they know to do in order to be counted? What do they need to do to support the process? We have in our studio here in Abuja the Director, National Population Commission, who is also the census manager of the 2023 Nigerian Population and Housing Census, a member of the Governing Board National Identity Management Commission. He wears many caps, so he should be able to answer all the questions. Dr. Inu Ajalingo, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Good morning, Nigerians.
So my colleague hasn't set you up. but these are the designations you have.
Indeed. This is you. So let's start off real quick and look at May 3rd. Is it a fixed date? Is it going to start May 3rd? The population census?
By the grace of God, by the end of today, you'll be able to know. The chairman, hopefully, is going to address the press and tell us exactly where do we move from here, as far as the date is concerned.
As far as the date is concerned.
Yeah.
But in terms of the logistics, the planning, the equipping, the personnel to handle this, as the manager of the 2023 census, give us a lowdown.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to do that even anytime you wake me up as I'm sleeping. The census is a methodological process, and the National Population Commission, leveraging on the 2020 round of Census UN recommendations countries to leverage on digital technology for implementation of the census. We have tried to do that in all facets of the census implementation process, starting with our enumeration area demarcation, which to date we have demarcated about 773 local government areas, and the only local government area, which is Abadan in Borno State, we have used hybrid methodology to also demarcate it. So I can tell you that we have a 100% demarcation of the country. That is breaking the country into pieces of areas, ensuring that there is no overlap, so that we can send enumerators to a designated area to work. And that is critical in our process, and for any census, that is necessary. So we have successfully done that. And the next thing that we have done is to ensure that these demarcation exercises are tested. So we have run tests. We have done the first pre-test, the second pre-test, and a trial census, which is dress rehearsal for the exercise. Apart from that, we have leveraged on technology to ensure that Nigerians are given the opportunity to be recruited for the census, and with the intention of leaving no one behind. And we made it in such a way that people are going to apply online, and we can see where they are applying. We ensure that they apply in their communities, so that they will be able to speak to their people and ask questions in their local language. If the questionnaires we have translated into Yoruba, Hausa, Igbo is not adequate, they have their local language, which is going to be dealt with during the training, so that they can ask the question and ensure that this. Another thing is making sure people work in their environment, is that they are conversant with whatever that is happening in terms of security, in terms of movement, they are part of the community.
Well, while I see the advantage in that, and a lot of people certainly will, it does raise further questions as to whether or not are you saying that as we speak, if the census is going to happen on the 3rd of May or starts on the 3rd of May, we haven't hired enumerators already?
Sister, I can tell you that we have all the 855,000 enumerators required, both in hard copies and in soft copies, and we are ready to share with everyone.
But the people have already been hired?
People are already being hired.
Okay.
Yeah,
and they were hired from online applications?
From online applications, they are screened and interviewed, and those that we felt have succeeded. And one thing I can tell you, because of the massive number of people that have applied, we have been able to only finally recruit about 30% of the applications that we have got. So that is why some people will say that the applications are pending, because yes, we have to sieve and look at the credentials and also their capability to work.
How long have they been engaged for?
No, this process of recruitment have started since November last year. We gave people opportunity to apply online, and they have applied online, and we have begun the screening in early January.
No, what I'm saying is how long, for those that have been successful, how long is the entire duration of the census supposed to last?
All the duration of the census is about 1 month from training. We have 2 levels of training, the building numbering and household listing for 7 days. We have the actual training for persons enumeration for 5 days. That is 12 days of training. And we have about 15 days of fieldwork for building numbering and household listing, and also for persons enumerations, and also for mop-up, where if there are areas that are not adequately covered, so that they will be cleaned up and ensure that everybody is counted during the period of census.
So the actual counting, assuming the 3rd of May goes through, the actual counting doesn't begin on the 3rd of May?
The actual counting was supposed to begin on the 3rd of May, leading to 7th of May. But before that, you have activities. We have what we call building numbering and household listing. You have to go and look at all the buildings, how many households are in each of the buildings, so that by the time you go for the actual count, you have an idea that these are the number of households that you are going to visit for the census.
Okay, just to clarify, you've already done the building numbering and counting?
No, we have not done that.
Have you done the training already?
We have done training level up to facilitator level, up to state level. We have already trained 60,000 facilitators who are going to train about 855 enumerators and supervisors in about 20,000 classes across the country.
That hasn't been done?
That hasn't been done. That is the last lap.
But a date has been fixed for the actual counting to start?
Yeah.
May 3rd.
Normally, you have to put into consideration all your pre-census activities. And by the time we engage, based on our initial start-up date, by the time we engage our processes, our end date for the enumeration was 3rd to 7th of this. But that is to say that all training must have taken place, the building numbering and household listing must have taken place. And that is where we are.
Okay, so we all know how controversial our census, has been. I do recall in 2006 when we did the last census, I remember that because I was serving at the time, and I was looking forward to being counted, and somehow, I don't know whether my number was included. Maybe there was some methodology, but I don't.
You were not in Nigeria.
I was serving in Nigeria in a community, and I don't know if the enumerator skipped me, or maybe we were already accounted for some other way. So we've always seen that, data when it comes to census has always been controversial. How are you going to ensure that in this particular process that everyone can tag along, and eventually when the numbers come out to say this is how many Nigerians there are within this territorial space, that we will all be able to agree with those numbers?
My sister, I think things have changed between 2006 and now, and the way things are done now are different. And like I've said, technologies have provided limitless of opportunities for us to do things better, more efficient, more professional, and we are trying to leverage on all these technologies. One thing that I want Nigerians to appreciate, even as of today, the Commission has done wonderfully well. We are an organization that can point to each building in Nigeria and say that this building exists. And when we do that, that means we have the geo-coordinates of every standing building in Nigeria. That by no means is a small feat. And by that alone is not a small data for the country. To say that all the buildings that you have, you can point to it and say that, and you know absolutely where the location of the building is, where the locations of all the roads are, where the locations of all the rivers are. So everything that we have it in our geospatial database. And that has won us an international award for generating that database. And that database, the value is limitless. So that is just to say one. Two, with that database, we can now say, okay, Mope lives here. We can also attach you to a geocode. We can create a geocode, attaching you to a particular building, attaching you to a particular household. And this can be verifiable anytime you come and you want to know whether you are counted or not counted. So we are doing everything possible. We are leveraging on all the technologies that have been provided for the census, and these technologies are unlike before. As we send our enumerators to the field, we see their footprints. The tablet they carry, they don't need to ask anybody that I'm assigned to go to an Imo state, to go and work in Umpere local government area, to go and work in Owerri Nkoji locality. That tablet should be able to take you to an enumeration area where you are going to work. And that tablet will not allow you to go out of your enumeration area to enumerate outside the boundaries of your enumeration areas. So technology has provided that, and we have developed what we call 5 strategy to ensure. And again, in the past, some of us that have been privileged to do 2 censuses, we had to go to the data processing centers to manually check these questionnaires and ensure correctness of the instructions, the skips, and all these things. But now the copy itself that you are carrying will not allow you to even do an error. It will tell you that, look, the question that you have been asking is not correctly answered because it's not consistent. So a lot of opportunities is there, and I believe that by the time we implement this census, Nigerians will be happy with the outcome, and they will accept it because they can verify the data, and they can verify even what we have done presently.
Let me take this conversation to Lagos. My colleagues have questions for you.
Thank you, Maokwe. Let me begin by confirming from you, Dr. Jalingo, the response you gave to the first question Nyota asked you about the date. As far back as a month ago, March 26 to be precise, the DG of the NPC already made it clear that the date was shifted and it is rock solid March 3 to 5. That's the takeoff. May, make a pardon, thank you. May 3 to 5, that's the takeoff. Your response sounds like maybe there could be a shift. Is that correct?
Yeah, by the end of today, like I have said, the Commission, by the grace of God, is having a high-level consultations. And at the end of this consultation, the chairman will come out and address the Nigerians on the issue of date.
What necessitated that, if I can just, my apologies, just a second, Dr. Jalingo. What necessitated that? He already made it clear. Is there likely to be a shift?
Yeah, from what we are doing and from the processes we need to do to arrive at May 3rd, I think that may be necessitated. But like I have said, I don't want to be taken into that discussion. By the end of today, the person that is designated to speak on that, the chairman, who is a policymaker, I think will address the issue of that. And I believe that that can be done as soon as today. So I will try to, as much as possible, deal with the technical issues as to regards our preparation, which I can tell you, and I can stand by what I have said, that we are prepared for the census if we are going to start today.
In the same vein, Mr. Jalingo, you said earlier that building, numbering, and counting have not been done for an exercise that is supposed to be held, just about 5 days from now, in spite of the uncertainty that now hangs over it. Why has sensitization been low over this uncertainty? And perhaps if I may ask, why the uncertainty again? Because when the DG announced the new date, it sounded like it was pretty much cast in stone.
Yeah, my sister, I can tell you that in life there is nothing that is cast on stone. And where your power ends, that is the beginning of someone's power. So there is a leadership in the country, and census is a very huge national assignment, and that requires engagement at the highest level of governance. And I think except that is done, then a clear message will be sent to all Nigerians as far as that. But on the technical process, yes, before you do a census, that is persons enumerations, we have what we call building numbering and household listing. We have all information on the building stock, but between the enumeration area demarcation and now, some buildings have sprung up in so many places, and some has been demolished. So there are a lot of issues. So we need to go and update our buildings that we have in our database, a readiness for the census. We also have to identify the households that are there, and that process will take about 7 days of training and 5 days of fieldwork to be able to do, and about 2 to 3 days of field validation to ensure that there is consistency in the information that we have.
Dr.
So we cannot do the persons enumeration.
My apologies for butting you because we're running out of time. It's a little befuddling, I mean, that this has to come up now. You already said it now that you had 2 phases of the enumeration and demarcation, of the process. So in a sense, we can say that the census has begun with those enumeration and demarcations that you talked about the other time. But saying that because some houses have sprung up and then we have to postpone, I'm wondering how that is significant, because even during the entire process, houses will continue to spring up. We were told here a few days ago that there are 35,000 building sites or construction sites in Lagos alone. How much more in Nigeria? So how is that significantly affecting this process?
Yeah, it's a technical process. I've started by saying that census is always methodological. So, and before you actually go for persons enumerations, you have to identify in each of the buildings how many households are there, and that will be the frame for the actual implementation of the census. And that is done prior to the persons enumerations. And it has been consistently done like that all over the world. So it's a process that we need to follow, and we need to do it to ensure that we get all the buildings and also all the persons. It doesn't have anything to do with the demarcation which has been done. So the demarcation has been done. The whole country is carved into enumeration areas for people to visit. And so that building number and household listing also will take place, because we need to list all the buildings and the households that we are coming to do the enumerations.
Go ahead.
Well, Mr. Jalingo, again, according to information put out, there's supposed to be some form of collaboration with the subnationals on the exercise, especially for an exercise that is supposed to be on such a large scale. But I ask again, why is sensitization almost non-existent on social media and on the traditional media on how Nigerians should prepare for this exercise?
Yeah, we have developed a strategy for that, and as you can see, we have started implementing that strategy. At the national level, we have a national publicity committee, and which is headed by no any other person than the Minister of Information and National Orientation. So, and if you can see, they have a town hall meeting in Kano. They had a similar one again in Ibadan. That is just at the national space. And if you look at what is happening in the states, our state commissioners have also replicated these committees in the local government in the states, and they are also being replicated in the local government area. I can promise you that you will see very massive publicity and advocacy that is taking place. We have started this long time ago at high level, where the chairman have visited virtually all the critical stakeholders. I have visited some governors. So it's an ongoing thing, and we'll continue to ensure that we get the information about the census to all Nigerians in the marketplaces, in every public space.
So we will see, how soon will we see this massive publicity? How soon will we see this massive publicity?
It has started. If we have tried to do it in such a way that the election have just finished, and we didn't want to compete with the space of election and also the space of the census. But immediately after the election, you can see that there is a lot of improvement in terms of communication and advocacy for the census and publicity across the country. And we'll continue doing that more, and I think that is why I'm here today too.
Dr. Inua Jalingo, we want to thank you so much for coming. But that matter of funding, your chairman said funding, security, it's sorted.
That was the Minister of State for Finance and Budget and Planning. And I think these are all the issues that are going to be put on discussions, and I believe that we'll find a way out of it today. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Director, National Population Commission, Census Manager 2023, Census Member, Governing Board, National Identity Management Commission. Thank you for coming in this morning.
It's a pleasure having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's where we would, what do you say? Call it a day on the show today. I want to thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. Apologies for our inability to take your tweets and your emails. I am Neota Igbe.
Well, keep it locked in here so you'll know when they eventually announce if the census will be going on as planned. But thank you for watching. Thank you for also letting us be an entire part of your April. Can't believe it's almost the end of April already. Thank you for watching. I'm Maokwe Ogun Yusuf.
And have yourselves a wonderful weekend. Make it count. I am Bukola Koka.
And just to be clear, communication. This census involves 200 million people. That's no mean number. Amaya Makinde, have a wonderful rest of your day.
Ranking, and they don't call me World Best for no reason. I only deal with the best. Be it auto or business, 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to world-class insurance services. Insurance.
Where insurance truly works.
From the north to the south, east and west, Network Africa brings you news stories from all around the continent. With wide range in coverage, insights, and analysis of special issues, we dissect Africa in its beauty and peculiarities. Network Africa tells the African story from the African perspective. Network Africa, weekdays at 4 p.m.